Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Esoteric Lighthouse, episode 16, Signs and Symbols, part two. We'll be going over the sun and the point within the circle, the 24-inch gauge, chalk, charcoal, and clay, and salt, sulfur, and mercury. Welcome to Esoteric Lighthouse. We are a group of free and accepted Masons from regular and recognized Masonic Grand Lodges focused on esoteric, occult, and philosophical lessons found in Freemasonry. This being a public forum, our views and interpretations are not legal or official statements or opinions of any Grand Lodges, Masonic bodies we hold membership with. All opinions, thoughts, and interpretations are solely of the individual panelists. All right, good evening. Once again, Michael Williams, and I'll be going through some very unique interpretations of some of the signs and symbols that we find in Freemasonry. Everything that is presented is researchable and it's something you can look up on your own if you have the time and references are readily available. I'll start off with the sun. The sun is the entire life of the solar system. It intensely palpates in the heart of the sun. The excuse me. The solar system intensely palpates with the heart of the sun. The gravitational force of the sun maintains the entire solar family with their mechanical orbits. It is the giver and the supporter of life. It is a symbol of deity. It can also symbolize the male as a balance by the female, who is the moon. From Latin solaris, the sun, from luna, sol, the sun, the Romans called the sun God's soul, which is in Greek, helios. In esotericism, the term solar is generally used in concert with the lunar companion. And this duality can have many implications. In Western esotericism, the solar aspect is seen as masculine, warm, and polarized as positive or plus, not good, just the opposite polarity of lunar, which is negative or minus. The sun continued. The sun is a source of physical consciousness, the self, the conscious I. It serves in synthesis with an active and the self in relation with its environment. The heart of the sun stimulates and enlivens the soul's awareness. In esoteric astrology, the sun's purpose is to act as a vehicle for externalization of love and wisdom. The sun should always be looked upon as a vehicle for energy and of the personality. The sun brings in energy and cohesion and creative potential in one's life. To the mind of the ancient Mason, the physical sun is the center of our system, from which the earth receives the requisite grade of force necessary for every terrestrial manifestation of power, organic, inorganic, vital, and physical, was but the emblem of the spiritual sun, which exerts that degree of celestial energy, which in matter becomes occult force and in man becomes will and mental power by C.C. Zane. The point within the circle. The point within the circle is the world upon which we live, which is bounded by the circle of the zodiac. It is a common astrological and now astronomical symbol for the sun. The point within the circle is an alchemical symbol for gold and for the perfection of all matter on all levels, including that of the mind, the spirit, and the soul. The symbol's association with both gold and the sun evidently dates back as far as ancient Egypt. Gold, the noble metal, was named after Sol, the golden sun, whose symbol was a perfect spear. And later, the seven metals were assigned, and it was a seventh metal that was assigned to a day of the week. Thus, Sunday was gold, Sol. One site notices that a dot or a point in the center of a circle symbolizes the blending of male and female forces. Hindus call the midpoint of the circle Bindu, the spark of masculine life within the cosmic womb. The 24-inch gauge. In the Kabbalah, 24 hours is a great mystery that we must contemplate and study. It represents the mysteries of Malkuth, which is our physicality, also which are equal to the 24 hours of the day and night. The 24th mystery is 2 plus 4 equals 6, or the creation of Adam on the sixth day. In the minor arcanum of the tarot, the 24th arcanum is the weaver. The weaver is the mystery of the divine mother nature weaving the loom of God. 2 plus 4 equals 6. 6 is the number of the lovers, which is the mystery of the great arcanum, with the lovers ebbing and flowing twice in 24 hours of the day. Love love constantly ebbs and flows with emotional and spiritual energy. 24 is also broken down into three equal parts of 8, 8, and 8. The Eightfold Path of Esoteric Buddhism, there's an Eightfold Path of Esoteric Buddhism, and the three H's represent the vehicles or the bodies of man. You have the causal body, which is the body of will, the Buddhic body, which is the body of the consciousness, and the atomic body, which is the vehicle for the innermost or your being. 888 it establishes a spiritual triad, which is the symbol of a monad. A monad refers in cosmology, the supreme being, the divinity, or the totality of all things, or the point within the circle. The number 8 represents the sign infinity. The number 8 also symbolizes the two intertwined serpents around the spinal medulla, which are also the two witnesses or the cherubs on the Ark of the Covenant, and also the caduceus of Mercury. Therefore, the Holy Eight is the path of the spine and the path of the razor's edge. Within the sign of infinity are symbolized the brain, the heart, and the sex of Melchizedek, the genie of the earth. The struggle is terrible between the brain against the sex against the brain, and the heart against the heart. Y'all let that sink in and think on that for a second. 8, 8, and 8 forms represents the father with 1 8 in Hokmah, the mother, another 8 in Binah, and the unlimited potential, another 8, which is in Da'at, or this forms the mystical uh, word Shabbat. This is also Ida and Pingala and Shumshuna. Ida and Pingala are also known as Boaz and Jachin, and are also the poles on the Ark of the Covenant. 24 divided by 2, or the zodiac sign, and is how each symbol is affecting us by the signs as well. What I mean by that is that we're affected by the 24 hours of the day and the 12 zodiac signs at the same time, well, twice in 24 hours. The zodiac signs actually, or as we move through the cosmos and through the zodiac, certain elements of our personality may be influenced or infected by the time of the day, the hour of the day, or the month of the year. Twice in 24 hours is relating to the waters of regeneration and the cycles of life and death. Cancer and Capricorn. Let that sit in for a second. Life is influenced by the zodiac signs, in total of 12. Each sign must be taken into consideration with their application on the 24 hours of the day. All the zodiac signs rise, culminate, and set within the limits of the 24-inch gauge. The influences of the zodiac go hand in hand with the 24-inch gauge, i.e., the natal chart and birth charts, etc. Chalk, charcoal, and clay. or salt, sulfur, and mercury. Freedom, fervency, and zeal are present in chalk, charcoal, and clay. That is chalk, or sorry, excuse me, that is charcoal, which is used for fuel, is a symbol of fire, and hence the fervency of creative energy. Clay is an igneous rock that has been eroded by ice and thus represents the union of fire and water, male and female principles. And it is stated that nothing is more zealous than clay bringing forth. Chalk is chiefly composed of the minute shells of a foramina fera being deposited in the shallow water of the sea. It is thus the animal origin, and well symbolizes the offspring or life resulting from union of male and female principles. There are three basic chemical substances which are called the philosophers salt, sulfur, and mercury, but which are not confounded in any way with the crude salt, sulfur, and mercury of the mineral kingdom. Salt, sulfur, and mercury each have a triune nature, for each of these substances contains in reality also the other two substances, according to the secret of the Arcanum of the Wise, quoted by von Welling. These three elements form a trinity of creative power, or the law of three. Salt relates to matter, the mercury relates to the sexual energy, and sulfur is to the fire. Salt's alchemical symbol represents duality and unity at the same time. Physically speaking, there are masculine salts and feminine salts. Esoterically speaking, we say the exact same thing. In alchemy, Mercury is not the physical Mercury, it is Mercury Hermes, which is the messenger of the gods. Physically, Mercury is also called Quicksilver, and it has a very curious property. It's liquid stone, yet it is liquid metal. Sulfur represents fire, not physical fire, but the fire of the body, the fire in the atoms, the fire in every existing thing, the fire of life. These three elements work exactly the same way as the trinity of the tree of life, or in Chabad, with Abba, Ima, and the Zera and Pin. Salt is a trinity within itself, meaning our body has fire, which is sulfur, and and sexual energy, which is mercury. So the salt is the three. Our sexual energy, our mercury also has the salt in it and the sulfur in it as fire. So really, mercury in itself is also three, and similarly with sulfur is also three. Thus, with an analysis, you have the three, three, and another three, which equal nine. And with that, we'll turn it over to our discussion part of the show tonight. Greetings,
Brother Mike
brothers.
is oh, pardon me. Go ahead, bro.
I was just saying greetings, brothers.
Okay. As I stated before we started recording, I'm somewhere where things are kind of noisy, but I wanted to thank Brother Mike for presenting those things because I think as men and masons, the more that we study, the more we begin to realize that things are not separate, right? They're aspects of something in all things. So I love the breakdown how you said that when we look at Mercury, even if we look at the symbol of Mercury, we actually see the crescent moon, we see the circle for the sun, and then we also see the cross, right, which we call the union of both energies, right? So we see that within just that one symbol. And I think it's important for folks to realize that that's very important, particularly when we talk about this, the great work in which we're engaged. Um, and I'll just leave it there for now, bro.
Yeah, and that's the beauty of symbolism. When you look at it through the aspects of masonry, uh, all the symbols of masonry, they work in a cohesive unit. We just have to extract that material and that information to be able to understand and decipher those. Uh, the symbols that I broke down today, they all work hand in hand and they're synonymous with each other. You can't have one without the other. And if you notice, the whole theme, although these were the salt, sulfur, and mercury, chalk, charcoal, and clay, the 24-inch gauge, and the point within the circle in the sun, it's all one thing that's going on. It's centrifugal motion or the rite of circumambulation. So I didn't speak on circumambulation directly, but if you look at the rotation of everything that's going on, it's a process of going from one stage to another, and it's always in a circular motion.
Yeah, and just building on that too, bro. I found that it's most important for us to, particularly when we talk about Masonic instruction and education, it's very important for the teachers to be the ones who are really studying and pushing themselves further, and not only learning the knowledge, but learning the application of that knowledge and that understanding, which we call wisdom. And so our younger Masons who come into the craft have got to see how these have practical applications. And I always been big on telling brothers, like brothers be like, oh man, you're organized and your usual vocation has you be that way. I was like, no, I've seen myself become better because I know how to utilize those hours which I'm working. It's not going to be a perfect 8, brother Mike. You like me. That 8 might have to be broken down into 3, 3, and 2, and you're taking care of some other things in between there, right? But your labor and your refreshment, those periods are very important for you. And I had to kind of learn to, um, as we say sometimes, you can kind of extend that gauge becomes longer or it becomes double-sided because you know how to work in advance, right? So you have a future goal. You say, okay, next Friday, I need to get these things done. Okay, what are the easier things that I could take care of now? Get them out of the way so I'm not stuck at the last minute focused on the menial tasks. I could prepare for this early. Like sometimes I'll do that with my agendas. I'll do my agendas early in advance, kind of close to the end of my last meeting. Why? Because things are fresh in my head and I have an understanding of um, the brother's comfort levels with certain things. I could also remember the motions that were made, what was carried, what did not happen, and why. So moving into cabinet meetings, moving a little bit forward, you can say, oh, well, this is where we were here. Let's deal with this here so that further down the line, we can take care of that. So now you learn how to utilize your gauge much more effectively. And that's what that whole working tool is, in my opinion.
Right. And you hit it right on the head. You don't have to, people think, okay, I got this 24-inch gauge, and in masonry it says 8, 8, and 8. You got to do it 8 consecutive hours. Like you said, you break it down. You might have to do 5 and 3, 4 and 4, 4, 2 and 2. It doesn't really matter. What matters is that you're you're utilizing your time wisely. And what it all boils down to is, you when you're looking at 8, 8, and 8 again, you're going back down to 6 when you use gematria. What that 6 represents is, like I said, it's the creation of Adam. You're talking about the creative process. You're talking about thinking. You're talking about becoming an evolved man, the thinking man's game. That's how you become a better man, by your utilization of the 8, 8, and 8. It doesn't matter how you do it. It's all about the creative faculties and the creative processes inside your mind, which is the 6th day. Your 6th day is when you go out and you create and you make man, not any other man, but yourself as man. You go out and build your temple the way you see fit, utilizing the tools that you've been given previously in the other 5 days.
Can't guide someone down the path you haven't traveled yourself, right?
Exactly. If you haven't traveled the path, how can you teach someone else? But at the same time, you can't have somebody travel your path. Only thing you can do is show them a road, but that road will be walked differently. No one walks the same path. Although the tree may be on the same side, the light may be on the opposite side, but it's not the same road because we're not the same people.
So yeah, now we got busted up a little bit here too, because you were touching on the great arcanum, and essentially, and it was a mind blowing moment for me when I went from the point of looking at the tarot as cards, right? A divination tool, something astrological, and then it became something where it was like, when viewed in the proper context, you're actually looking at your life, the different stages of life that you're going through. Um, so it could be, as you said, it could be a path, right? But your journey's a little bit different. Um, and then going back to something that you said before about the sun being that active principle within our lives. My sun is in Mercury, so I've done my chart. I've seen that I could be active, right? That's the active principle, which is great. But they say that the downside to that, or let's say the opposite principle of that, is being restless, sometimes being rash, hasty in my decision making, things like that. So over the time of my life, I've been working on that, whereas I've learned to be patient. Somebody said, think 3 times before you say something, right? So if I keep take myself through that process, you naturally gain that patience and the thought or the insight into dealing with situations differently. Because in the past, I would have been rash. All right, hold on.
Yeah, and what you just hit on, you reminded me of something that I'm reading currently. I'm reading Beelzebub's Tales to His Grandson by Gurdjieff, and in there, Gurdjieff, he describes that the humans on our planet, again, as you've heard me in the past talk about three brains, he also touches on the three brains. He said these three brain creatures here on Earth, they're always in motion. They're never standing still. They don't have patience. They're always restless. He said all it need to do is channel the power of the sun and be still, be calm and be serene. However, our own nature by default, we worry about everything. We put things and roadblocks and obstacles in our way where we become stuck and stagnant in chasing after those things and not realizing that none of it really matters. What really matters is the stillness and the calmness of the mind. And with that, you go back to when I was speaking on the monad, and also being in relation to Chabad, Kether, I'm not Kether, but Hokmah, Binah, and Da'at, which is knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. When you said, they say, think 3 times or before you do anything, first you encompass the knowledge, then you get the understanding, and then you employ wisdom to use that knowledge and that instrument that you came through. So when somebody actually tells you, hey, you need to, hey, think this through 3 times before you actually do something, they're telling you to use those three different faculties of Chabad inside yourself, and also your three brains, which is your mental brain, your emotional brain, and your instinctual brain, which is found in your sex. That's where Mercury comes in. You said your sign is in Mercury. That's your instinctive energy that's pulling you to go out there and do these things. But at the same time, it may seem rash, but rashness is your instinct. It's your defining mechanism that will make you go out there and challenge and conquer anything that you need to conquer. You need to have that energy. Uh, yeah, at times we need to subdue our passions, but learning how to subdue those passions, as you mentioned, brother Chris L, is improving yourself in masonry by subduing that passion of being rash and not using too much of your Mercury.
Yeah, I think that was definitely key, bro. as you would say, being on that middle point, right? The midpoint of the circle, you don't extinguish your instinct. You don't extinguish that fire. What you When we talk about subduing our passions, we're controlling, right? We're in charge of that. So we say, okay, this is what my instinct is telling me to do. Let me pull in these other sources of information and make the proper decision or the right decision. So that's just kind of like what I've been learning.
Yeah.
And it makes it so that now those instincts and those passions work for us and not against us, or we don't work for them, because they're still useful to us, especially when you talk about how the 24-inch gauge break down to eight. Eight is represents infinity. All of these things go back to say, okay, in that higher triad, which we can put back into a monad, it all works for one common goal. So all of these things to, subdue the passions, it's all to work for you, and to understand them means you subdue them to understand them. And once you understand them, they work for you. And once they work for you, now you can move ahead in life or through your spiritual journey, fully equipped with what you need to properly advance your spirit.
Right. It, people they think subduing is meaning to completely cut off something. That's abstinence. Abstinence and subduing is two different things. You can abstain from one thing and you can not use that ever. Like somebody who doesn't drink, they abstain from alcohol. Well, they don't need alcohol. I don't drink, so it's good to go. But subduing is basically you cover it for a time being, then you release it for another time. Because at that time, you may not need to use that energy, but you need to subdue your passions, which is basically control them, put them in that put them in the ring or the arena where you're in control of them and them not being in control of you. Uh, right now, I'll be completely honest. We live in a world where everybody is using all of their passions to control them and not the other way around. And then you hear them say, "Well, I'm a very passionate person." Great, you're a passionate person, but you have to know how to use your passion. And then the other flip to that coin is that people don't understand the word passion. A couple of us brothers had a discussion earlier this week. We were talking about the difference between passion and eros. People, especially in masonry, they think that doing their passions. I've heard too many brothers, oh, like, yeah, I got to get this under control. We're not talking about sex or things like that. We're talking about anything that will steer you away from obtaining the goal which you set for yourself, which is knowledge of self, which is wisdom, and trying to understand your meaning and your purpose in this thing we call life. Subduing those things that take you or deviate you from that path versus eros, which most people commonly confuse with passion. Eros deals with sex. Eros deals with you going out and using that instinctual energy to go on a hunt to look for prey per se. But yes, that needs to be subdued as well. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about passions. Passions is, as I said before, anything that will deviate you from your goal of obtaining your goal.
All the
Yeah, that
vices
goes
and
along with
superfluities.
Yeah,
within due bounds also.
yeah, yeah. Keep you in due bounds. The left and right, or the two pillars, the two St. Johns, whichever one. And when you look at those two pillars on the left and right, and then you're supposed to be walking in the center, that in Buddhism is the eightfold path. You have the pillar on the
Right.
left and the pillar on the right, and you're in the center. Those three must agree. Those three right there are eight, eight, and eight. It's showing you right there on pretty much on everything in masonry that those three is how you utilize the 24-inch gauge. Understanding that, brother Javon, you had something.
Oh no, I was the do bounds part. That's what I was thinking.
Uh,
Keeping within due bounds, it goes right ahead with the circle
And
with that.
speaking of those dude bounds, it just gave me like the imagery of the sun in the center of our solar system. All the planets orbit the sun.
right.
Each planet has a gravitational pull, and each of those planets' gravitational pull does affect the sun, causing it to have a slight wobble. However, it is not enough to pull the sun out of its purpose. So if each of those planets represents those vices of superfluities or those passions that we're supposed to subdue, they are in our orbit, they're in our control. And while they may cause us to step to the left or step to the right, or take a slight step in front or slight step in back, they cannot necessarily take us out of due bounds. And if we understand this concept, it would better help us align with our purpose and to find what it is we're here to do and to actually do it and not talk about doing it. And speaking to the second before, we live in a world of vice. And it reminds me of the last conversation we had about those masks that we wear. We wear these masks to show ourselves to be more than who we are or to be a different version of ourselves. If we can get rid of those masks and get rid of those vices and fully bring them under control, then we're able to walk more freely in who we are and who we're trying to be or meant to be without need to care for what is expected of us to be. Just my 2 cents.
Right. And just speaking of masks, like you said, we all wear masks, and what we're doing is we're hiding in the shadow of the sun when we put those masks on. Just like you said, that the sun keeps everything in good order. I mean, it's literally those planets and the sun represent the days of our lives. These are the days of our lives. If for those, telling my age, if y'all know that show right there, but when the days of our lives, that 24-inch gauge, the sun, how we move throughout the zodiac signs, the 12 months of the year, all of that stuff, it's all saying one thing. This is how you create yourself. Everything right here is all about the creative process. You're going to one goal, and that goal is death. But before you get to that final destination, you have to create yourself as the individual you want to see to propel forward. We don't know what's going to happen after death, but we do know what we can do to get to another level of understanding and higher consciousness so we can die in peace.
Man, that's powerful. Powerful right there. I recall, back in the day, bro, and Charles, let's say C. Freeman referred to this several times. Like he was like, you don't want to be tragically ripped away from death. Like you don't want to die in a situation where you're across the street and get hit by a bus, because he was saying that literally what happens is your soul gets knocked out of his body, not the way that it's supposed to come out. He said, when we die, we're supposed to go out through the top of your head, right? And it kind of reminds me of like how some of the elders in the past they would lay down and they say, I'm ready to go. And then they would just go,
Yeah,
peaceful. So I think a lot of our ancestors, whether they were conscious of it or not, lived their lives in such a way that when they left peaceful. We have a lot of folks over time right now, they're just leaving very tragically, like they're just being taken out of their bodies. For what Freeman Hill was saying, you'll be doing that, you get knocked out of your body, you don't even know you're dead yet. You're just walking around until you end up wherever you are. But I just found that to be interesting.
Right. Yeah. And one thing I found interesting was doing my research that Capricorn and Cancer came up synonymously with the 24 hours and the cycles of life and death. If you look at it, Cancer It's right in the middle of summer, and Capricorn is ushering in death or winter. So we also see another parallel, which are, I think that's, yeah, those are the St. John's as well, the two poles, the two polarities. So when you take those two symbols and you apply them to this whole discussion, we're still talking about how are we living and how we're dying. I don't want to sound like I'm beating on a dead horse talking about this subject, but in reality, I think the whole goal of masonry is for us to learn how to live so we can die properly. It's not about wearing an apron. It's not about being in a party, doing all that other stuff. The charity that we are provided or supposed to be providing as masons to other masons is the way to live accordingly and peacefully to your own standards, to show yourself approved, so you in your right mind when you check out, you're at peace. And one of my mentors, Byron Hams, he wrote a paper called "Forever an Apprentice," and one of my favorite papers, by the way. If you go on Freemasonry, you'll find it there. And he talks about forever being an apprentice. When you start looking at everything in the entered apprentice degree, you're given all the working tools of life. You're given all the symbols of life in the first degree. However, you don't learn how to use your working tools, and you actually don't really use your working tools as a quote unquote semi professional or expert until you become a fellow craft. Until then, you're an apprentice. You're still in the learning phase. What the working tools and all these symbols are given, they're given to you so you can learn and explore them. So you can figure out how to put them into use for the builder's intent. So you have trial and error. An apprentice, your whole purpose is trial and error. It's like OJT. You have to go in and you have to go out and get that OJT and practice your building. Personally, I think we should have longer waiting periods between the entered apprentice degree and the fellow craft degree so you can practice that, practice what it would, to basically think what it would feel like to be an operative mason and what it would feel like to sit there and be in a quarries chipping away at stone. If we had masonry like that, where it caused you to contemplate instead of rush through a degree, improve proficiency, we probably have better masons today. And we'd have more love for the craft because brothers would be encouraged and empowered in their understanding of their knowledge of masonry versus a fly by night, I'll push you through a degree. Thanks, Brother
And
Chris, for posting the link in the chat.
and that's a much bigger discussion on the idea of quality versus quantity. And even though this is a speculative art, we use it operatively once you understand it, because I use these speculative ideas and lessons to actively operate on my spiritual temple. So if I am able to spend more time as an entered apprentice, I can see, well, what is a vice? What is a superfluity? What is everything in my life that's a vice? What are these things that are inhibiting me from being my best self? And once you kind of get those ideas and can outline that, now you can actually begin to work. And so as you then proceed to the fellowcraft degree, then you're able to build upon a stronger foundation of understanding that only gets better as you progress through into the third degree. And like again, rushing through degrees, proving proficiency that's based upon memorization, it shows how huge of a lack of understanding there is. Because if we were truly understanding of what we possess, you wouldn't see some of the lackadaisical masonry we see today.
Yeah, and I completely agree. The lackadaisical masonry, it comes from, like you said, they want quantity over quantity. And I get it. History has proven that there was a reason for the decline, and what they were trying to do was to get the numbers in so we can continue on. But with that, doing my research, I'm finding that in the late 1800s, that was the pinnacle of masonry right then and there in the United States. Prior to, you want to say like the 1850s, I mean, like most states only had like 15 to 20,000 Grand Lodge Estate Masons, and Prince Hall Masonry wasn't there. We had a couple states that had Prince Hall Masonry in the free colonies, but the numbers of masonry, the numbers in Masons in America just does not add up from the time it was to the time that it is now. I'm of the opinion and the assumption that masonry has just about the same amount of number of masons that it's been having in the United States for the last 250 years. So that's a fallacy, in my opinion, that uh, it's all about quantity over quality. So we need to fix that mindset and really focus on quality, getting quality brothers in, getting quality teaching, and everybody being of that, being of the caliber of a brother who wants to be here and who wants to be a Mason, not only in name, but as in spirit and in soul of the organization.
Remove the allure of titles and chains and aprons. Get back to the lesson. And I think the biggest boon of Freemasonry occurred after World War II. You had so many soldiers who had been stationed overseas for so long that they came back home and needed something else to do. And then you had a mass rush of them joining lodges, looking for that void of brotherhood. I believe, if what I remember correctly, filling that void, but at the same time, you had a massive increase. You also had so many who, after joining, it wasn't what they expected. They expected the camaraderie and the fun and freeness that they experienced with their military brothers. Instead, they came into something that was a little bit more serious, uh, and not of course not more serious in the military on the importance, but serious as in this is not a playground. Or so you see an increase, but you also see so many who join and also leave shortly thereafter. So I am also of the opinion that the true number of Masons has relatively sustained over the last couple hundred years. It's just more noticeable now with the foolishness on social media and so many saying the same thing.
Correct. And social media, it's a double-edged sword. We all know that. Most of us met through social media, and you meet good people, but at the same time, you get the bad. So you have to separate the wheat from the chaff, as Brother Watson usually says. And yeah, that's how it is.
Yeah,
Brother
kind
Williams.
of embarrassed. Oh, go ahead, brother Phil.
I was just in the midst of the conversation, I was contemplating on something that you stated, which resonates with me, and I find it to be very profound. And that is, as Masons, we live. Let me say this: to live is to suffer. To die is to find the meaning of the suffering. So we are charged to be upright men with purpose and meaning to add to our life. to live a purposeful and meaningful life. So in the end, when it comes to that time where we meet that grand architect in the sky, we have a meaningful and purposeful death. Because if you're not living to your fullest capabilities, potential, then in my opinion, you're already dead. It brings me to mind in the BSL, I believe it was Ezekiel in the Valley of the Dry Bones. We're spiritually dead. And once you're spiritually dead, then that encompasses your mental capacity as well as your physical capacity. You're just existing to be here and not fulfill or serve your purpose. You mentioned the tools that we were handed in the common gavel. Speak of soufflurities, the only quarry and stone that we're chipping away is that of our mind, our mental capacity, because everything is mental. You know, your mind tells the body what to do. You know, we're told to, once again in the BSL, we are told to guard our heart, but yet master our mind. Thus, those tools that we're chipping away is those soufflurities that exist only in the mind. Nowhere else does envy, jealousy, greed, or any of the other vices exist outside of the mind, because it's all mental. And when you talk about those three minds, that with me that those soufflurities are housed within all three of those mental capacities. And
Right.
in order for us to get there, it goes back to what Brother Chris just stated, is study. We have to sharpen, the mind is the greatest tool that we have available to us. That needs to be sharpened. And the only way.
Brother Fields, I think we lost you.
Oh, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay. So, that charge we were given in that first degree was in our idle time is to seek wise counsel of a well-informed brother, as well as study for ourselves, because we can formulate our own opinions based on the information or the knowledge, if you will, that's passed on to us. And I would have to agree with everyone else. And, this is only my opinion, and that's all it is an opinion, is some of us have lost that luster when we first came into Masonry, because, what we thought was shiny and glittering, it started getting tarnished by things that were unmasonic, in my opinion. We lost our way in the teachings, and more importantly, having an understanding of those teachings. So we as a whole, we need to, once again, go through that circumambulation and then go back to that point in the circle and define who we are, because we are at the center. Because if, we were created in his image, then we're at the center of our own individual universe, if you will. So we need to figure out our direction in the courses and steps that we're taking to uphold who we were designed and created to be. And those are just my thoughts.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for sharing.
Brother Mike, could I just chime in with a little something there, since Brother Fields was talking about stones?
Yes, sir.
So real briefly, if we think about it from the common sense aspect, brothers, based on the different grades of the workmen, we have to kind of dispel that myth of them talking about our ancestors using slave labor to build these pyramids. Because if we think about it logically, yeah, okay, bro, I got you. If we think about it logically, there had to be a certain level of proficiency held by those people who actually did that work. So even if we say that the apprentices were down there just banging out these rocks, right? And they were moving them along and they were just passing them along, that still required a certain level of skill to extract that rock from that quarry without breaking it in half and things like that, right? So then they move it on. You got the fellow crafts. These are the ones who were squaring it up, making sure it was true, making sure that these blocks fit together with such nicety, right? People couldn't believe that it was put together by the hands of man, right? And then, right, those were the folks who actually did that work. So I just want to dispel that, Brother Mike, before, we move on. Like a lot of people just thought that they just went out there and grabbed a whole bunch of folks and said, hey, go down there, cut out these stones, put them in place, and then build this pyramid. Nah, it required a certain level of skill that was only taught within certain schools. That's all I'm gonna say, and I'm off, bro.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree because they said that the stonemasons before speculative masonry came into being, many of them were illiterate. It's impossible for you to be illiterate and not know mathematics or any type of geometry or any type of science to build these cathedrals that are sitting up here across the Europe. Um, Universities and things like that were being filled by people who were making these things. It's that I agree. You can't be an apprentice and not have some level of understanding of what's going on. You have to have that working knowledge and understanding of stonework, uh, even if it was cathedral building or ancient Egyptians building those pyramids or any pyramids across the world. Um, and there are more pyramids across the world, but I believe the pyramids in Giza are the most known and the most relevant, and I believe the most ancient that they've discovered. Until they find something anything older, that's what we'll have to do. We'll have to believe. Um, but again, Brother Leonard said something in chat. He says, even if you were illiterate as a new apprentice, by the time you advance, you should have learned, or you would have learned the necessary tool to be a fellow craft, which is true as well. Yeah. But again, thank you everyone for attending this month's episode of Esoteric Lighthouse. Next month, we'll be going over the rite of circumambulation, the dervishes, and also the 7 liberal arts and sciences. Till next month, good evening.